Good morning, students. Welcome back to the next session of compiler construction. So, today we are going to discuss on the remaining concept of the first chapter of the compiler construction. As you people already know that in the last session, in the last class, we have completed some of the basic concepts of the unit 1. So, if you see there, we have completed this part. We have completed this part, and also we have seen what are the programs which are related to the compilers, and also we know we have completed the translation process. So this topics we have covered. So today in this class we will be covering what we are covering today is the data structures which are being used in compiler, and the issues which are related to the compiler structure, and lastly we will be discussing bootstrapping and porting process. Okay, so as I already mentioned that what is a compiler, and we have seen the history of compiler as well. Also we have seen the related terms, the related softwares or related programs which are related with compilers. We have seen such as interpreters, assemblers, linkers, loaders, preprocessors, editors, debuggers, profiles, project managers. Also I covered translation process. In that I have said you the phases of compiler, that in each phase some part of the compiler work will going to be get performed. So this is how we have seen in the last class. So well, today I'll be saying you on the data structures which are being used in a compiler. As you know, in every programming language we will be having a data structures. Okay, similarly in compiler also the data structures will also be there, but in a different way. What will be the important data structures? Because see here, the construction, the structure of, the process of compilation is just not a single process. It is a combination of different phases. So for each phase we require a communication. For each phase we require a communication, so that communication can happen through this data structures. So this data structures, if you see, the first is tokens. See, as you people are already aware that tokens is something it will be an output from the scanner process. So scanner basically collects the source lines of codes, and it will give you a set of tokens. A set of tokens usually will be a set of characters. It will be either something around the names of identifiers or any values of any number. So it's such kind of things will be there. So that's why you may consider as enumerated data type here, because it is not just specific. Here you can define the data type, that's why you can term this as enumerated data types. Okay, and also it can have a group of similar values. For example, if they have a similar tokens or similar set of values, then also it can forms an array of tokens. Okay, it can also have a single global variable also. So many things can be there in tokens. Okay, so these tokens are something then output from scanner and input for the next phase, that is syntax analyzer. So the next part of the data structure here is the syntax tree. If you see here in the syntax tree, what is the syntax tree? You know, it's a tree, but it is a pointer based structure. It's a pointer based structure because it has to be generated by parser. So parser is something like what happens in parser. For example, as you know, it is a tree, that means it's a collection of nodes. So a group of nodes represents a tree, but what these nodes contain? this node actually represents the information which is collected by a parser. Okay, and that can be allocated to symbol table. Okay, so symbol table is something which used to keep the information of all of the nodes of a tree. Okay, so the syntax tree, and also the nodes whatever the which are there in the syntax tree, what it represents, it requires different attributes. Attributes means a different kind of information, and also because it is not something, for example, you may develop a compiler with different languages. So as you develop the compiler with different languages, so based on the language on which you have developed a compiler, so the structure, based on the structure of the particular language which you have opted for building compiler or for constructing compiler, based on that the structure will going to be get formed, and based on that the attribute will be provided. So also the variable record. So record is a collection of information. Okay, so that collection of all of those informations will also be considered based on the language. So this is regarding about syntax tree. Now the most important part of data structures is about symbol table. Symbol table is one kind of a part where it communicates with all of the phases of the compiler. As I said you that all the 6 phases can communicate with directly with symbol table, because symbol table will give information to the relevant phases. How it will give information? Because it stores such kind of information in it. What kind of information is stored in it? For example, if in any line of code, how many identifiers are there, what many identifiers are there, what can be, for example, if you are taking a program and if you want to compile that, so if taking program is your input for your compiler. So in program you may have a set of identifiers, you may have set of functions, you may have set of variables, you may have set of different data types as well as constants or any other information which is related for that particular program will be present in that program. So all that kind of information, that how many functions are there, what kind of functions are there, what kind of variables are there, what kind of values, I mean constants are there. So all this kind of information will be provided in symbol table. So that's why symbol table will interact with every phase of compiler. It's because it can be required at any moment of time, and the access operation among all of the phases of the compiler with symbol table will be in a constant time. Why? Because it is to be in constant because it has to interact with everyone. So that's why here the amount of time which is taken is in constant way. Also it requires how it communicates. Now the question is, if I say symbol table, if you see this diagram here, if I say this is your symbol table and these are what the phases, right? So using this symbol table, it communicates with all of the phases of the compiler. So it performs a mechanism of hashing process. So hash table will be used here in order to communicate with symbol table and the phases of compiler. And who is responsible for that hash mapping? So mapping is a procedure which maps the information from symbol table to the rest of the phases, to all of the phases of the compiler, or else from the phases of the compiler to the symbol table. So that's why the mechanism to communicate symbol table with all the phases of compiler is through hash table. So it depends on what kind of information is sharing and what kind of type of communication is happening. Based on that, it can have one hash table or more than one hash tables. So this is regarding symbol table. The next is literal table. So literal table is also a kind of data structure, but here literal means here it stores the values of strings. It stores the values of constants. Why? Because if it stores such kind of information, ultimately the size of program get reduces. And because constants may have values which occupies more memory, let us assume in that sense, and if there are any strings which are associated with the program and strings have a large number of strings are there, so that ultimately it requires a memory. So that's why in order to just store such kind of information, what happens here is ultimately reduces the size of program, because whenever that part, that constants are required or that strings information or strings are required, this relator table will held responsible for providing that kind of information. So that's why here, in order to perform this kind of process, here we are using quick insertion. So this quick insertion will make the accessing between the literal tables and the faces will be in a speedy one. Also a lookup will be there. Lookup is something like it checks for the given strings, it checks for the given constants whether that particular constants or strings are present or not. If that lookup will, because of this lookup, it will get the information that so and so the content is required for the given phase of the compiler. So this is regarding literal table. Similarly, you may have intermediate code. See, intermediate code is not actually your desired code or final code, and it is not also your primary code. So it means like it is not a primary code that is your source code, neither it is it's not even your the desired code. So what is this is like, just is a intermediate code is something like a temporary text, you may assume in that sense, okay, or else array of text string, depending on the type of intermediate code, what kind of information it has to be provided. So because as you know, intermediate code is something which is used to communicate with the source code with the destination one. That means the two parts of the, basically if you see in a compiler, the one is to get the information from the source code, okay, and the other is to provide the object code to the given machine. So what happens, intermediate code acts as a communicator between both of them. So because of this, what happens here is, in order to reorganize the data, because of intermediate code, it will becomes easier, because this intermediate code will acts as like a support which gives such kind of information whenever it requires. So it depends on the type of data. So it might be it uses 3 address code, or might be it uses P code. So based on that, this works here. So that's why intermediate code is also a part of data structure, because anything which communicates between among phases of compiler and which give information or which give data or which takes data or which communicates between two phases or multiple phases and which acts as a support for them are considered to be as a data structures. So that's why here this is about intermediate code. The next thing about temporary files. So temporary files are just something like during compilation process, what happens, there are certain steps are being required. So that steps might be used at that moment of time, but not at the end, not always. So that's why this temporary file as a support for them, okay, and also it solves the problem of memory constraints. If you have less amount of memory and large amount of data has to be processed, then this temporary files will support such kind of information in order to handle less amount of memory. That means it handles memory constraints. Or else you can also term this as backpatch. Backpatch is something like a relief or a support through at the time when the code is get generated. I mean like when it performs, when it converts into object code. So this is how something the process, the temporary file acts as a support, acts as a reliever, acts as handles that such kind of memory where it requires large amount of memory. That means it handles the problem of memory constraints. So that's why this temporary file also plays a major role. Now this is regarding about the data structures which I have discussed just now. Now if you go with the next part, that is the second part of this session, is the issues which are related with compiler structures. So, if I say compiler structures can be viewed in a different way. So, basically you may view a structure of compiler into three different perspectives. The one is something you can view if you are viewing the compiler if you are viewing the compiler as a logical structure, then the terminologies of compiler will get changed, and if you view a compiler in physical aspect, then also the terminologies which are being using in the compiler will get changes. And the third is something like as I said you that 6 phases are there. So phases by phases the sequencing has been performed. So the sequencing of the operation will also that can also be used in compiler. So if you see logical structure, if you see logical structures, so logical structures means it can divide something around like two parts, analysis and synthesis. So in logical structure, if I assume, then it can consider as analysis and synthesis. So the analysis part of the compiler means it analyzes the source program, okay, analyzes the source program to compute its properties. For example, initially what is the role of compiler? Compiler role is to take the source code or source program and in order to convert them into machine language code or machine code. So the source code that has to be get analyzes. So that analysis process will be done by compiler. So that process is called as analysis part. And who will going to take that all of this analysis part? What is that? Lexical analysis, the first phase, the next syntax analysis and semantic analysis. Analysis means verifying the data. Lexical analysis means analyzing the data in order to generate tokens. Syntax analysis means analyzing the tokens in order to check the grammar of the given code. And semantic analysis means using the grammar which you achieved from the syntax analysis, it verifies for the meaning, it analyzes for the meaning of the given source code, okay. As well as you may consider as optimization. This optimization is not the optimization which done after generating object code. This optimization means before converting into object code, if there is a need for optimization, then that optimization will be considered as part of this analysis phase, okay. So analyzing means analyzing the data, the source code in different aspects. Something around to get group of tokens, something around to check the grammar, something around to check the meaning, and something around in order to optimize the code. So that's why all of this come under your analysis phase. The next part is what your synthesis part. So synthesis part is the second part, because if I say logical structure, in synthesis part what happens, the synthesis part of the compiler produces the translated code. So the next remaining phases which are being come under your compiler will come under synthesis part. So synthesis means first analyzing the data and synthesizing the data to produce the translated code means object code. That's why whatever the code generation or else the optimized code generation or any specialized type of code generation, all of this will come under your synthesis part. So here this code generation as well as this optimization is on object code, and this optimization is on source code, okay. So the two parts, that is analysis or synthesis parts, can be changed independently of the other. That is, there is no dependency among themselves. because analysis is something which is related with the source code and synthesis which is related with the machine. Because based on the machine on which it is performing, that has to be converted into machine language code or object code. Now if I say the next is physical structure, so in physical structure I can divide into two types, that is front end and back end. So front end, for example, the input for the front end is your source code. Okay, so the front end will perform in, that is scanner, which I said just now, parser, semantic analyzer, as well as intermediate code synthesis also. Okay, here the difference here, you may think that okay, like analysis means the same thing as like as this one, but in front end there is a difference. Here intermediate code synthesis will also come under your front end. Okay, because intermediate code is not something a final code, right? Anyhow, that is one type of code which is generated from the source code, and it acts as a bridge between your source code to your object code, right? I mean to your target code. So that's why even here it will come under your front end. And the operations, if you say in the back end, depends on the target language. Okay, on which language you want to generate. So based on that, the back end works here. So that's why code generation or any type of optimization which will be performed on the code generation will come under your back end. Okay, so this structure is actually important for compiler portability. That means like you can say that you have taken a compiler, you have developed a compiler and you are using that compiler for any other language. So that means the portability should be there, something around the process of cross compiler. So cross compiler here will be applicable when there is a portability of compiler in different machine. Develop in one machine, executing in another machine is something the portability issue can happen. So that is all the role of cross compiler. So you can consider this aspect, front end and back end, as your portability concept. This will be come under in the view of portability. So this is regarding front end and back end. Now the next is sequencing of the operation. So the third one is your sequencing of the operation. So sequencing of the operation, just now I said you that we have 6 phases of compiler. So you can use passes. Okay, so passes is something around like from pass is something, you see there is a difference between pass and there is a difference between phases. Okay, don't get confused or don't think that passes and phases are a same single word. No, passes are different, phases are different. I'll let you know the difference. What is the difference between phases and passes? Pass is something like it can have more than one phase also, but phase is something specific with one phase. Okay, pass can have one phase or else more than one phase. So a compiler can have one pass also. For example, in your compiler, as I said, there are 6 phases. That means all these 6 phases of compiler you can take in one pass also. So that means a compiler can be one pass. Okay, but what happens if I take in such scenario that if I am taking only one pass and in one pass I am taking all the 6 phases, so the result for the compilation will be inefficient. I mean like the target code which I want to get will be less efficient target code. So in order to increase the efficiency of the target code, I have to increase the number of passes. Okay, so that's why the most compilers, so compiler is just not specific with any which is only not one compiler. It can have different compilers based on their language. So most of the compilers, if they use optimization technique, what they'll do is they won't use only single pass. Okay, they will use more than one pass, so that something around like 3 passes, let us consider in a case. So for example, if you take here, how they used to take is one pass, for example, they may consider for scanning and parsing. So the first two phases, and as next one pass they will consider as semantic analysis and source level optimization. Okay, this optimization is like around from the source level. Source means source program optimization, source code optimization. And finally they will take third pass. In this third pass they will go for code generation. Okay, code generation means target code, and also optimization on target code. Okay, so that's why they will be considering in this way. So the first two phases, scanning and parsing, will come under in one pass. The second, next, third and fourth phase, that is semantic analysis and source level optimization, will be considered in the second pass, and the third pass they will be going for code generation and target level optimization. So in this way the passes works. Okay, so what is meant by passes? Passes is something like for an entire source program, the repetition to process the source program before generating code. Okay, before generating code. So that is how something called as passes. Okay, so this passes you may call as sequencing of the operations. So in that sense, now all of these structures will have impact of reliability, how much reliable the view is there, which should be opt for that, how much it should be efficient, and whether really that is useful for our purpose or not, and whether it maintains the maintainability or not. So these are the impact factors for getting the structures or for having the structure of the compilers. That too, they may have more factors, more impact factors, but here these are the major one. So this is regarding about the structure of compiler. Also we have different concepts such as language definition and compiler. See, remember the first two phases, that is lexical and syntactic phase, will deal with what they will deal with: regular expression and context free grammar. Okay, so this regular expression and context free grammar will be a part of the first two phases of the compiler. I am not saying passes, phases. And semantics of the programming language. Okay, so language definition, here the term is called language definition. Language definition simply means, you can say as language reference manual. Okay, see here, for an English, if I want to check whether, like for an English, how the semantic will be, whether you are getting the meaning or not, so there should be a reference manual. As you people might know about that generally, but something around there will be a manual. So based on that the semantic will be judged. Similarly, the compiler also, the semantics works based on the language definition. So this language definition means language reference manual. Based on that the semantics of the language works. Okay, and a language definition or compiler will be developed simultaneously. Why? Because see, in order to develop compiler, we need to develop semantic analysis phase. So semantic analysis phase will check the meaning for a given code. How it will going to be checked? Through language definition. So that's why this language definition, see remember language definition means language reference manual. So this language definition or compiler will be developed simultaneously. Because if language definition will be developed, then semantic analysis works there. And if semantic analysis works there, then the remaining phases of the compiler will also be works in a appropriate way. Because semantic analysis is something, the third phase, which will give you the output, and the output of the semantic analysis phase will act as an input for the remaining phases. So the technique have a major impact on definition. What type of technique should be implemented, based on that the language definition will get decided. Okay, and that's why you can have that techniques plays an important role on definition, and definition plays a major impact on technique. Both are interrelated with each other. Okay, and the language like which to be implemented should be well known. That's why it's not a very easy task, because you have to work on that, and you have to work that how can you define a language. Okay, a proper rule to be framed for defining the language. I mean, like there should be a proper reference manual. So that's why it's not simple task. And the language which is occasionally has semantics, will be considered as denotational semantics. So this denotational semantics means mathematical models will be used in judging the semantics. Okay, so the mathematical models will be used here, so that mathematical models can be used in formal definition. So it can be occasionally used, not always. So that's why that means denotational semantics is not something that it always used, but it has sometimes it seldomly can be used. So if it uses, then it uses mathematical model or mathematical term, or else you can say as mathematical proof that can be used to define the language. And if you say the structure or the behavior of the runtime environments affect the compiler construction. How? Why? Because, for example, if I say like runtime environment is something like whenever the code is executing, so it requires such kind of environment. I mean, like amount of memory, type of memory, what type of memory will be allocated, or what type of environment will be allocated. So if I say a memory, what type of memory, it can be a static memory or it can be a dynamic memory. I mean, like in that also, if you go with that, so in static also it can have runtime memory or runtime environment. So that's why it can divide into, you may consider as 3 types. So static runtime. Okay, that means static means the memory will content will not change, but it will be in runtime environment. And the second one is semi-dynamic. Why it is called as semi-dynamic? Because it is using stack memory, but it is dynamic memory. So that's why stack based is something you can call as semi-dynamic memory. But if you go with the third one, fully dynamic memory, why it is fully? Because it is using heap memory, and as it is a dynamic based memory, that's why it is the heap based environment or the heap based memory is your fully dynamic memory. So that's why the runtime environment will also be affected the compiler constructions, because what type of environment you are selecting, that type of environment will be taken into consideration in order to construct a compiler. So these are all the issues actually which can be happen at the time of compiler construction. And also if you say interfacing, that how you are interfacing with the operation system. Operation system means like when, for example, whenever a compiler is executing or compiler is converting a one language into another language, how it will take the input values, how it will give you the output values to the computer, I mean to the operation system, how the file will be accessed for the target machine. Okay, that means whatever the files which are there, which are being used for conversion purpose, how it has been used to access them. So this is how mechanism for interfacing. This is also one of the issue in compiler. The next thing is about option to the user. So options to the user for various purposes. That means how you are using them. So like something like code optimization options are there. If you can provide some kind of, that means like, for example, if a language is there, if I want to include some more extra features on that, can I use for that purpose? So like example, code optimization option is there. So I can I include in that way? Can I use in that aspect so that the efficiency of the compiler get increases? Any updates can I add further? So all of this has to be considered while constructing a compiler or in the structure of the compiler. Next is about error handling also. Error handling is also a one kind of mechanism, because you know that always it's not compulsory, it's not guaranteed that there won't be any errors while at the time of performing the process on the compiler. So you may incur or you may have some kind of errors, such as static errors are there and dynamic errors are there. So that means compile time or runtime errors will be there. But mostly runtime errors is not the part here. Here compile time errors we have to report by the compiler, right? That means, for example, whenever a compiler compiles a program, it will give you compile time errors. So this compile time errors should be reported by compiler. So now the thing is that how this works. For example, if there is any error in a program, and it will give you the list of compile time errors which are being generated at the time when the program is compiled. And because of that, what happens? The compiler has not successfully compiled, I mean like it has not translated to the object code. So the reporting should be provided by compiler. How it provides? And also, like whenever a error will be provided, error message should be provided, it should be a meaningful error message. That means if suppose error is of one type and if it is giving a message of another error, that means it is not efficient one, isn't it or not? For example, an error is there in one line and it is giving in another line, or it is not giving a proper alert that particular line have so and so type of error, then also the efficiency of that compiler get decreases. So that's why whenever an error exists or whenever an error generates, it has to be reported correctly and it should resume compilation after each error. That means if anyone has solved that error, and again if the person is trying to compile again the same code after removing such kind of error which is exhibiting in particular line of code, it should resume the compilation process. Okay, and each phase of the compiler needs different kinds of error handling. Okay, because syntax is different thing, semantics is different thing. If meaning is not achieved, then also it should report an error. If you have not written code properly, then also it returns an error. So all of the phases will required in order to, and that all the phases should report to the error handler. So this error handler will give you the message that to the compiler that this so many errors have been reported. And now the compiler duty is to report such kind of error through an alert message. Next is about exception handling. Exception handling here something like if I generate extra code to perform some runtime test. So in order to guarantee that all such errors to cause an appropriate event during execution. That means like as I said, error handling is also there. The exception handling can also be happen here, and this what it guarantees is that whatever the errors which are exhibited, all such errors that should cause an event. That means if any error is there, it should cause an event. That event will let us know that there is an error. If suppose if there is no event generated, then you might know what kind of error you have. So that kind of mechanism should happen by exception handling of the compiler. Okay. Now this is about the related issues which are with compiler. The next thing is about bootstrapping and porting. Now if I say bootstrapping and porting, first we will go with the bootstrapping. So bootstrapping generally works here using T diagram. So before that we will be going to the concept on cross compiler or something, a compiler which compile the same same file with the same compiler. So for example, a compiler is, what is the role of compiler? To execute immediately whatever it is into a machine language. For example, if you have taken two scenarios, in the first scenario what we have did here is, we have taken another language with the existing compiler on the same target machine. Okay, the target machine is the same. Target machine means to what it is converting. So now we are taking compile the new compiler with the existing compiler, and in the second scenario we are taking not with the same machine but with different machine. That's why if the machine get changes, it becomes as a cross compiler, okay, or else it becomes as existing compiler. Anyhow, I'll let you know with an example here. So in order to go with bootstrapping process, so bootstrapping, before going to the bootstrapping process, we should need to understand about the T diagram, that T diagram is how will be used in complex situation. For example, a compiler is there, can be categorized into three language. What is that? Source language, from where the compiler, the source language is the input for the compiler, and T is the source language you have taken as S, okay. So this is what your source language. Now this T is your target language, to which it is going to get converted, and this is H. What is that? Implementation language. Okay. What do you mean by this T diagram? T diagram will give you three scenarios, three cases. The first thing is that S represents, so S is your source language, T is your target language, and H is your implementation language. So what do you mean by this T diagram? Means a compiler written in language H. Okay. Now H is a compiler, remember implementation language means H is a compiler which returns in one language H, and it translates a language S into language T. Okay. So in that sense it is. For example, S is your C language, and if it is H is something your language, it is developed through Unix. Okay. So compiler is developed through Unix. So now C language is converted into T, means your machine language. So that T, that's why it, in this way T diagram will be represented. So this T diagram can be combined into two basic ways. Just now we have seen the scenarios, right? Now we will be seeing. So the first combination of T diagram here is that if you see this part, the first T diagram, if you see, the first T diagram will tell us that you have taken a compiler with language H, okay. This is your compiler, H is your compiler, A is your language, and it is converted into B. Now B is your target language and A is your source language, and H is your compiler. Now if I am taking another T diagram where the compiler is same, right, where the compiler is same, and if I am taking source language as B, and if I try to convert into C, so if I combine these two T's, so what happens here is, here as you know that this B are same, so in the resulted one it will give you as this A and this H and this C. So A, C, H, it will give in this way. So what do you mean by this T diagram combination? That if there are two compilers run on the same machine, okay, two compilers run on the same machine H, from one language to another language, that is from A to B and from B to C. So the result is that using the same machine H, I can convert from A to C. What I can do is I can convert from A to C. So this is what the first combination. Now if I go with the second T diagram combination, if you see the first T diagram, what it is? if the first T diagram, if I say what is that, A is a source language and B is your destination language, target language, and you are using compiler H. Okay, and I am using another T diagram in which I am using, what I am using here is, if I am using M here, what this M means I am using different machine language. I mean I am using what is that, here it is, if you see implementation language. So this implementation language, if I am changing the implementation language, but this H is your source code and this K is your destination. So if I combine this T diagram in such a way that this H and H should be same here, so that what happens, this A, B and this K will be taken here. So this A, this B and this K, A, B, K. So what you can do here according to this T diagram combination means, so whenever a 2 T diagram is there, so their adjacent value should be same, like here HH is there, previously it is BB is there. Okay. So that means simply you can say that if I translate implementation language of a compiler from H to K, I am using another compiler from H to K. Okay. That means here from if I am using another compiler, now what I can do is I can use this K as a compiler in order to translate from language A to B. Okay. So that's why this is your second T diagram combination. Now the first scenario which I said, another language with existed compiler on the same target machine, Okay. Now what I am doing here is I am taking A and H and I am taking B here. What do you mean by that? This A and B are different. That means A is a language, this is my source language, but the compiler is in language B and I am converting into H. And if I take second T diagram, that means I am converting from language from B to H with a compiler H. So here also what I am doing, using the combination, this combination, what I can do here is, here if BB are same, so A, H, H and this is H. So what it is happening here is, I am using that means a language from a language that is the source language from A, it is converting into language H with the same compiler H. Another language with existed compiler on the same target machine. Okay, on the same target machine. So this is your same target machine. That means the compiler and the target machine are same. This is your first scenario. That means you are translating a compiler from A to H written in B. First one. And using second point, if I say, if I use an existing compiler, okay, from language B on machine H, okay, from language B on machine H. So this is how the first scenario works here. Now what is the second scenario is, so this is something how the third language for compiler construction will be there. That means if I am using third language in compiler construction, so that's why you can frame as in two scenarios. The first one with existing compiler and the second one is with cross compiler. So now the second, what is the second scenario here? It is that another language with existed compiler on different machine. Here it is on different machine. So this H and K are different here. Okay. So the machine here, it is different. Okay, this is the machine, here it is different, and this H is also different. Previously this H and this H are same. Okay, this is same compiler, and here it is cross compiler. Okay, so use an existing compiler for language B. So AHB I have used, I am also using here AHB. Use an existing compiler for language B. Now what I am using on different machine K. So now the machine has been changed to K. If I use the machine K now, what it happens, as this B and this B will be same, so it will be omitted. So finally you will be having A, H and this K. So this condition results to as cross compiler. Okay. So before actually going to bootstrapping and porting, we should know what is in compiler or cross compiler. Now exactly we are coming to the concept now, bootstrapping. So what is bootstrapping is actually, whenever at the compilation development, this can be widely used. Why? Because for example, bootstrapping is a concept where you are producing a self-hosting compiler. What do you mean by self-hosting compiler? Here if I say this S and this S are same. What do you mean by this S and this S are same? It means that it is self-hosting compiler. What is self-hosting compiler means? It's a type of compiler that can compile its own source code. Okay, so this is your compiler and this is compiling the same source code. So this and these are equal. So that's why it is called as self-hosting compiler. Okay, so bootstrapping, the process of bootstrapping is used to produce such kind of self-hosting compiler. So bootstrapping compiler is used to compile the compiler, and then you can use the compiled compiler to compile everything. Okay, so just read out this, you can come to know that it is used to compile the compiler. It is used to compile. So this is used to compile the compiler. So here S is used to compile the compiler S in order to generate into machine code. So in this way the bootstrapping works here. So this is how a bootstrapping, that means write a compiler in the same language. So in bootstrapping this S and this S will be same. Okay, and the porting here means if I use this onto the new host machine, if I am using onto the same machine, then it is not a porting process. But if I am using them into a new host machine, porting means something, new environment will be adapted. So if a new environment is adapted, then that is called as porting method. Anyhow, we will see that. So in the first step of bootstrap, so what I am doing here is, I am using A and A, as I said that A is your compiler and A is your source language. So A is compiling the compiler A, which is converting into H, and again I am using H compiler. So here I am using this H compiler. So that is quick and dirty compiler, which is written in machine language H. Okay, so here this is your machine language H, it has been written. So compiler written in its own language A. So now if this first case, the compiler written its own language A, what happens because of this, as I said you, if you go with the combination here, in this second scenario or else first scenario if you consider, what happens here is this A and A are same. That's why we are using T diagram in order to solve that issues of bootstrapping. So what happens, it results in running but inefficient compiler. So the second step here is, what happens, the same, actually it is how the continuation here. The first step is you are taking this one and second step is you are getting this result. So if you are getting this result, what happens here is it results in final version of the compiler. How the final version of compiler here, if I say, is this h and h is there. So compiler return its own language A, right? But this is how it is running in inefficient compiler, and it will giving you in this way. So this A and A will get cancelled, and this AH and this H will be taken. Okay, this H will be taken. So this is regarding the bootstrapping process. So if you see this diagram, again the same thing it is. Here if you say AHA, the compiler return its own language A, and here compiler in machine language. H and H is machine language, right? So what it happens, it will run, but it will give you an inefficient compiler. Why it is inefficient? Because this H and this H will be like, because of this compiler H, it will be an inefficient compiler. So again the same thing here it is. So finally how it happens in this way, because here we are not using the another host machine. Okay, we are using the same here, same machine. So that's why this thing will be there. Now in order to go with the another host machine, we are using the concept of porting, or else you can call as cross compiler. Cross compiler means the same compiler is there, you are making the compiler to port into a new computer. Can be a different platform. So if I am taking into a new computer, that means I am using that compiler into new computer, that means I am using the process of cross compilers. So what it requires is that the backend of the source code be rewritten. Why? Because here I said you that front end is something which is related with the code, and back end is which is related with the machine. Machine means the computer. So here the back end will get changed here. So what we have to do is the back end of the source code has to be rewritten. Why it has to be rewritten? Because it has to rewritten in order to for a new computer. Okay, in order to have in a new computer, that's why it is to rewritten to generate code for the new machine. If it is working in the same machine, there is no need to rewrite the code again. But as you know, it is working for a new machine, so it has to rewrite the code. So it has to rewrite to generate the code for a new machine. So this rewritten code which is there, it has first it is then compiled using the old compiler. Okay, so to produce a cross compiler, because see a code will be used in order for a new existing machine, but rewritten code is used for a new machine. So first thing, the first process is the rewritten code has to be compiled by old compiler. If it is compiled by old compiler, then it produces cross compiler, and as it produces cross compiler, again this compiler is again recompiled by that cross compiler. Cross compiler means the compiler which is used for a new machine. So that new machine again it will be recompiled. So when it is recompiled by the cross compiler to produce a working version of the new machine. That's why this porting works here. So if you see now, if you see the step 1 here we are using original compiler. Okay. Now what we are doing here is we are targeting the code to K. Now this K is your this K is your new machine. Okay. So new machine. So that's why while you are performing this process, what you are doing here is you are using this part for cross compilation. Okay, this cross compilation. So now this cross compilation again needs to recompile. So that's why this AK, okay, again, so this AK, whatever you have got, here if you can see the difference. Here it is AH, previously it is AH. but now again it is recompiled by the cross compiler. So when it is recompiled by the cross compiler, so finally what happens here is it will give you as AKK. So now this is your what the retargeted compiler. Okay, and here the porting works here, the porting gets successful by this part. That means if you see this diagram, what happens initially is compiler first process, if you see the first process, compiler source code retargeted to K. Okay, here it is retargeted to K, so that means this becomes as cross compiler, as it because it is retargeted here. First here it is A and A, means here it is bootstrapping process, now it becomes as a cross compiler. Okay, because it has been retargeted to this K. After retargeting to K, what happened, the compiler source code retargeted to K anyhow, but now again I am using this process with, again I need to recompile again the cross compiler. So now again I am recompiling this cross compiler. So in order to get, actually here it is A, here it is K. Okay, so this is your retargeted compiler. So in this way the porting works. Porting means adapting the cross compiler into new machine or new environment is what your porting process. So that's why first we have retargeted to K, and again after retargeting to K we have targeted to K in order to get cross compiler. Again we have retargeted to K through that cross compiler to get retargeted compiler. So this is regarding your porting process. So this is regarding both bootstrapping and porting process. So this completes your first chapter of your first unit.